Welcome to the WalterFootball.com podcast. This is episode 288. We're talking about the Cam Newton signing with the Patriots and also the AFC East and Nfc East season previews. Joined once again by Jacob Camenker. Jacob, how are you?
I am very happy. I was just telling you right before we got started, Cam Newton signing with the Patriots is both good for me because I don't have to deal with Jarrett Stidham, and also good for me because I actually have two Cam Newton action figures, which are now behind me on either side of the shoulders, behind my thumbs. So I had plenty of decorations to get ready for this podcast. And I'm feeling a lot more hopeful than I was when Stidham looked like he was going to be our only option at quarterback this year.
Very nice. Might as well get into it real quick. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit subscribe. That would help us a lot. And also hit the notification bell and thumbs up the video. All that would be great. And if you know someone who likes football who is not aware of the podcast or the website, send this link out to them. It would mean a lot to us. I guess we know that you like the signing. I gave it an A+ on the site. What grade would you give it? And what are your general thoughts on the signing otherwise?
Yeah, I probably also would give it an A+. I just think that there's literally no downside to this signing. It's a one-year deal. It's well below the market value for what a former MVP should get. And I know Newton hasn't been at his MVP form in a couple of years at this point because of injuries. But the fact of the matter is that he's still a talented quarterback, and he's only going to be making a max of $7.5 million. Chase Daniel, I believe, is making more this year than Cam Newton, which is absolute insanity. And the beautiful thing about this contract is if Newton was somehow outplayed by Jarrett Stidham, which I doubt would happen, they can still hold on to him as a high-priced backup, and they don't have to worry about any long-term money or overpaying Cam Newton or anything. So I think they've made out well in that regard. I just think it was a smart deal overall, waiting out the market and getting him at the right price. And from a talent perspective, Cam Newton is still a very good quarterback when healthy. I know people kind of forget just how good he is because last year he only appeared in 2 games and was pretty lousy, but he was dealing with a foot injury that he actually suffered against the Patriots in the preseason. I believe that game was actually in 2018, but in 2019 he re-aggravated that injury. So, he's been dealing with that foot for a couple years at this point. But if you look at him statistically through his last 16 games, he actually lines up fairly well with what Tom Brady put out last year. Granted, Newton threw more interceptions and obviously had more rushing yards. But statistically, they both threw 24 passing touchdowns. They both threw for close to 4,000 passing yards. So you're getting a player who can be statistically similar to Brady. And that's when Newton was at his worst and a little bit injured. And Brady, had one of the worst years of his career last year. So maybe it's not fair to compare the last 16 games, but I think it's a positive sign. And just one more thing, I think Newton's mobility is going to add another dimension to this Patriots offense, because if you look at this team, it's really built to be a run-heavy team. They have a lot of talent at running back, minimal talent at receiver, but a really excellent offensive line, better than anything that Newton had at any point during his time with the Panthers. So I think if that line can keep him healthy and he can just add a little bit to the running game with his legs, whether it's on option plays or designed quarterback runs or bootlegs, I think that's going to really help the Patriots. So I think he really transforms this team, and they go from a team that I thought may have trouble reaching 500 with Jarrett Stidham to a team that's legitimat+ in the mix to be the winner of this division for yet another year. So I absolutely love the move.
Yeah, I love it as well. I gave it an A+ on the site, as I said earlier. Like you said, there's no downside. It's $7.5 million for 1 year. If he doesn't work out, they get rid of him, and they don't carry the money over into the next offseason. That's the only downside, really, and it's not that big of a deal. The upside is tremendous, though. I mean, we've seen Newton perform on an MVP level 5 years ago. Granted, we don't know if he's going to be healthy, and if he performs like he did last year, and he was pretty poor last year, like you said, against the Rams and the Buccaneers in 2 losses. And he was clearly injured. Remember, he came into the preseason with a shoulder concern, and then he looked good in training camp, and I was very high on him, and then he got his foot injured. So that's the reason why he struggled in those 2 games. So if he performs like he did against the Rams and the Buccaneers this year, the Patriots are still going to be around 500. But the upside is just enormous. Like if he's at least like 85% or 90% of what he once was during the MVP season, yeah, they can definitely win the division. They're going to be right there with the Bills. They're definitely going to be ahead of the Jets and the Dolphins, who are still rebuilding. But if Newton is completely healthy and he performs like he did in 2015, which can happen. I mean, he's not that old. I believe he's 31. So if he performs at that level, the Patriots can win the Super Bowl. Like, they have a great defense. They have a great offensive line, like you said. I believe the running game will improve. Sonny Michel was injured last year. He had a knee coming into the year. Maybe he'll be better. Maybe Damian Harris, with some experience, will do something. They have a big weakness at receiver, like you said, but there are going to be opportunities for them to make a trade. Like I posted a list on the site. I think AJ Green makes a lot of sense. He's an expiring contract. Odell Beckham, someone else, Will Fuller, like Keenan Allen, like all these guys have expiring contracts. Not Beckham, but everyone else. So it makes a lot of sense for the Patriots to trade for him, for one of them. So I think things are much brighter in New England right now than they were with Jarrett Stidham. Though I was looking forward to seeing what the Patriots had with Stidham, because they didn't draft anyone in the 2020 NFL draft. So I thought, like, maybe Belichick knows something. So I'm kind of like, that's the only disappointment I have. But I think overall, it's a great move by the Patriots.
Yeah, and I don't think we're done with Stidham at this point. Like, I think this move also has to do a little bit with how unique this offseason has been. There haven't been camps for Stidham to get together really with his receivers and kind of improve that chemistry, him get coached up. I mean, with the whole pandemic, everything's been shuttered. So I think that Belichick signing Newton now is a kind of him admitting, like, okay, maybe Stidham won't be ready this year. And, maybe he thought he could get him ready before the season. But now that we're in July and, Stidham hasn't had any live reps at a Patriots camp, he might be a little skeptical of that. So I think bringing in Newton from that perspective makes a ton of sense. I do love the idea of them trading for a receiver, as you said. Newton actually never really had great receivers in Carolina for most of his time there. He had Steve Smith. He always had one really good receiver, I feel like. Steve Smith, when he was there, did a really good job. Then DJ Moore came along, and there were some other people kind of in and out in the middle that I'm forgetting. But I think he can make it work with the weapons the Patriots have right now, but I would like to see them get one more guy. The guy on your list who I think is the most realistic target would be a Marvin Jones type from Detroit, because their front offices have a great working relationship. And just to throw a couple other names into the mix of some guys who you didn't mention, I could see if Kyle Shanahan is done with Dante Pettis over in San Francisco, I could see the Patriots buying low on him. Maybe a similar thing with Kiki Cutie over in Houston. He'd be kind of a little bit too similar to Edelman, who plays the slot, so he's not an ideal target. And they probably would rather get Fuller, but I think they have a lot of options for what they can do. And pretty much coming into this season, I thought it was going to be the weaknesses were quarterback and a receiver, and that posed a big problem for the team. But if they just have a weakness at receiver, they can get by, especially where Newton has proven that he can get by with weaker receivers in the past.
Yeah, he went to the Super Bowl in 2015. Kelvin Benjamin was his number one receiver, but Benjamin was out for the year. So we've seen Newton perform well without top tier receivers, and his mobility obviously is a big part of it. So his health is obviously going to be huge. But if the Patriots can get like a Marvin Jones, which I forgot briefly, he's another guy with an expiring contract. Like you said, the Lions and the Patriots have traded a lot over the years. So I think that makes a lot of sense. If the Lions start slowly, if they're out of the playoff mix, I can see the Patriots making a move for Marvin Jones, and it shouldn't cost too much. Granted, they don't have a third-round pick anymore because of the Bengals spying incident, but I don't think it'll cost more than a fourth rounder to get Marvin Jones, who has an expiring contract. So, I think. Like I said, I think things are looking way up for the Patriots right now. So I believe when we did the over-unders, I think you had the Patriots under. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So if memory serves correctly, I think you had them at 7-9. I could be wrong, ish. Or am I?
I think it was 7-9, 6-10. I had them below 500 no matter what.
Okay, so how does that change now? If let's say Newton is about 85 to 90% of what he was in 2015. Like what would your record for the Patriots be?
I'm much higher on them now. I think probably 10-6 is what I'd peg them at, because I think Newton just changes the game. He's multidimensional. He has experience. And I think being paired with an offensive mind like Josh McDaniels, I think is going to help him a lot. And again, even though the receiving weapons aren't that great, there's a lot of youth and upside between the tight ends they drafted. And I know N'Keal Harry has his issues and he had trouble separating as a rookie, but if he can use more body control and kind of become a big possession receiver type, a little bit like that, Devin Funchess, though a bit smaller than him, I could see him at least finding a role, because Cam Newton did like throwing to Funchess for some time. So I just think Newton changes the game, and he adds like at least 3 or 4 wins to their total. I just think because he's proven. Stidham, the big concern with him was he isn't proven. And even if he has talent, going up against a gauntlet of a schedule is going to be difficult for him to adjust to. But Newton's been there. Newton's been to the Super Bowl. He's played really difficult defenses, and he's played in one of the best divisions of the NFL, the NFC South. I know the Buccaneers weren't good for a while, but the Saints, Falcons, and Panthers were all really in the mix the past 5 to 10 years, give or take. So I think going to a weaker division will help him a little bit there too. So I just love the move. And I think the Patriots now, they should win double-digit games if Cam Newton can be healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I have him at 11-5, so even a little bit more bullish there. And I had the Bills at 11-5 as well. The tiebreaker is going to come down to the head-to-head matchups, and kind of spoiler alert, because I simulate every game. It'll be out in 5 days, I believe. I have the Bills sweeping the Patriots right now, because I think that the big mismatch in that matchup is the Bills secondary versus the Patriots receivers. I think that's so enormous, because the Bills have one of the best secondaries in the NFL. The Patriots probably have the worst receiving core in the NFL right now. Newton's legs changed that a little bit, but the Bills have a great athletic defense. So they should be able to take Newton scrambling away a little bit. I just watched the Ravens Bills game from last year in week 14. And that was like I believe 17-10 game, or 24-17 game, something like that, where Lamar Jackson was kind of limited because the Bills were able to shut him down, scrambling down. There was just one big play that Hayden Hurst broke, and that kind of that changed the game completely. So I think the Bills have the horses to contain the Patriots right now. That's why I think it's so important for the Patriots to get a good receiver like Marvin Jones, AJ Green, someone like that. That would really help them a lot in that matchup against the Bills. So if you want to transition to the Bills, how do you think they'll do this year?
I think the Bills will do pretty well, and I actually agree with your assessment that the Bills secondary should allow them to beat the Patriots possibly twice, at least once. So I could definitely see that happening. I think we saw the Bills really start to grow last year. Sean McDermott's one of the best young coaches in the NFL. He doesn't get the love he deserves because he's more defensive-minded, but what he's been able to do with that Bills defense is nothing short of spectacular. They really don't have a weakness on that unit. You can point to Josh Norman, who they signed as a free agent. If he's their number 2 cornerback, might be a little bit of a concern there, just because, he was burnt toast last year in Washington, but he's reuniting with McDermott, who coached him in Carolina. So he should be better and more energized playing for a winning team. So we'll see if he can bounce back, but pretty much everywhere else they're in good shape, and they've added some free agents that should help them out. I know they signed AJ Klein this offseason, and they drafted AJ Epinesa. So, and Quentin Jefferson, I think they landed from Seattle too. That was a steal of a deal. So they have a really deep front seven. They have an excellent secondary, one of the best in the league. And Tre'Davious White is up there as one of the best corners in the league. Him and Stephon Gilmore will be vying for that title. So, I think that defense is going to keep them competitive a lot. On offense, everything's going to boil down to, can Josh Allen take that next step? We're entering his 3rd year. We saw him improve last year, and really up his game a little bit. But he's got to improve his accuracy a little bit more, and just really learn how to use his cannon of an arm. I think he's going to get there. I think we saw him endure what was a painful loss to the Houston Texans last year in the playoffs. So I think that'll serve as fuel for him. And by getting Stephon Diggs and just more weapons around him, and Dawson Knox entering his 2nd season, I think he's going to have the weaponry around him to succeed. And if he either plateaus or regresses, then the Bills will have to start thinking about moving on from him. but I think he might be poised to make the leap and really get to that next level. So I like the Bills. I think they're probably an 11-5 team, like you have them pegged. I think I slightly favor them over the Patriots just because the questions about Newton, but I think it's going to be a really interesting 2-horse race there this season.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a 2-horse race. With Josh Allen, when he came into the NFL, I thought he was a 3-year project, and he was a little further along last year than I thought. He improved his completion percentage by 6 points. His touchdown to interception ratio went from 10 to 12 in 2018 to 20 to 9 last year. And that was without Stephon Diggs. So Stephon Diggs is a big game changer for the Bills. It should open up big lanes for Devin Singletary. Also, Josh Allen's a scrambler. Like, there'll be fewer men in the box with Allen threatening to throw to Diggs and John Brown downfield. There's also Cole Beasley. Dawson Knox, as you said, is going to have more experience. I love Singletary. I think he's going to have a big year. He was injured last year at times, so it took him a while to get going, but he really took over in the second half of the year, and that's when the Bills kind of exploded. Like, remember, they won at Dallas. It was a big upset. They went toe-to-toe with the Ravens. I thought that was a very close game, except for that one Hayden Hurst play that I mentioned earlier. And the Bills, they had a big lead on the Texans in the playoffs, and they squandered it. But I think that was a good learning experience for them. So I think they're going to be a lot better this year. I think they're a threat to go to the Super Bowl if Patrick Mahomes suffered an injury. I just think the Chiefs are just so far ahead of everyone because of Mahomes. But if Mahomes were to go down, or if it's like receiving core, like let's just say Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce get injured, I think there's a chance the Bills could overtake them in the conference. The Colts are still there, obviously, and I still like the Ravens. But I think the Bills are excellent. I just think that with their defense, I talked about earlier, you mentioned Quentin Jefferson and AJ Epinesa, and they also signed Mario Addison. I thought that was a nice addition as well. Like, they're so deep everywhere. Maybe cornerback is not as deep. You mentioned Josh Norman, the third corner. So like maybe that's a slight weakness, but I think overall they're just a great team. So I'm going 11-5.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly how you have to look at them. They're just so rock solid. It's hard to find a real weakness on this team unless you put Josh Allen under the microscope, and he gets more flack than I think he deserves to. A lot of people, like, when they bring up like, oh, the Bills would be so good without Josh Allen, I'm like, well, I mean, they're obviously better quarterbacks than Allen, but Allen got them to the playoffs in his second season, and I think he'll have a chance to get them there again. So we'll see how much he can grow, but I would not be surprised to see him have like a breakout campaign. Maybe not be like an elite quarterback or anything, but be really above average and have his mobility be a true game changer.
Yeah, we have another third-year quarterback in the division, Sam Darnold with the Jets, and I love the Jets over 7.5 last year, and they went 7-9 with Darnold missing 4 games with mono. That was kind of a big loser for me. So I'm going to Vegas in a couple of weeks. I was looking over my betting slips, and I had so much action on the Jets over 7.5. Like, if Darnold missed 3 games instead of 4, maybe they would have gotten there, but unfortunately they didn't. But now there's kind of turmoil. Like, Jamal Adams wants to be traded. There was a report by Manish Mehta from the New York Daily News. He reported that almost everyone on the Jets roster, except for Sam Darnold, hates Adam Gase. So things aren't looking too good, right?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that the Jets may have a little bit of bounce back potential this year. But I know both you and I hate Adam Gase, so there was always kind of some heavy skepticism. And by hate, I mean hate him as a coach. I'm sure he's a fine guy. But there was a heavy dose of skepticism in terms of trusting Gase to run this team right. And it does not sound like he's doing that. He just keeps alienating talented players, which makes no sense whatsoever. And I kind of feel that Darnold is kind of like gripping onto him right now because, if he doesn't, then he'll be on his third coach in as many seasons or third coach in 4 years in the NFL. And no player wants to go through that. And maybe they have a good working relationship. But I think you just look at this Jets team. They have some talent for sure. I really like what they did on the offensive line. They drafted Mekhi Becton. They signed Connor McGovern. So they added 2 potential starters to that unit, which was much worse last year than a lot of people, and by a lot of people, I mean myself, expected. I think a lot of people were lower on the Jets line than me, so I was wrong there. And they drafted Denzel Mims, another real athletic freak who I think adds a lot to their receiving core. Same with Rashad Perryman. So they should be better on offense, but if the players aren't buying into Gase, they'll quit on him and he'll be a real lame duck coach. And he just won't be able to put his system into effect. And I don't think they're particularly great on defense. And to further complicate matters, their best player, Jamal Adams, wants out. So I'm not trusting the Jets this year. I kind of think this might be a year where the players just kind of let things go a little bit. Not that they won't try hard, but they're not going to play super hard for Adam Gase if they don't like him. They're going to want him out. And maybe it could be a situation where if New York starts really slowly and then they oust Gase and then Greg Williams takes over as the interim, which would likely be the choice, they may play really hard for him and win some games. But I don't think that they're going to be in contention for any sort of playoff spot because their defense is a bit too weak and their coaching is extremely suspect at the top.
I used to like Adam Gase. I thought that he got the Dolphins to the playoffs that first year with Ryan Tannehill and then Matt Moore. So I liked him from the start, and obviously what he's done as a assistant head coach, offensive coordinator in the past. It just you look at all the players who have left him, like Devontae Parker, who was struggled completely under Gase. He had his best year just this past year. Kenyon Drake did nothing with Adam Gase. He just had his best year. And you look at the players who joined him. Le'Veon Bell went from a perennial Pro Bowler. He barely did anything last year. Sam Darnold has not really progressed. I thought Sam Darnold, at times, I would say he was better as a rookie than in his second year. And now maybe the mono had something to do with that, and he wasn't 100%. And someone who had mono in the past, I know that it takes a while to recover. So I think Darnold could be better this upcoming year, especially if he doesn't hate Adam Gase like everyone else does. But Adam Gase just ruins everything because I think I'd like this Jets team otherwise. If Jamal Adams wasn't asking out, if Adam Gase wasn't alienating everyone else. If you look at the Jets, they had some major injuries last year, not just with Darnold, but on defense as well. They missed C.J. Mosley for 14 games. They missed Avery Williamson, their other linebacker, for the entire year. They were missing the top two linebackers for every game except for two, and they get both guys back, and I think that's huge. Like, it should make the defense a lot better. They still have some holes, but Quinton Williams in his second year is going to be a lot better. Their secondary should be a little bit better as long as Jamal Adams doesn't leave. And then you mentioned their offensive line. Connor McGovern, I think, is a big upgrade at center. Greg Van Roten at guard, I think, is nice too. Not a big fan of George Fant, but we'll see. I think there's at least upside there. And then Mekhi Becton should be great. I just hate Adam Gase so much that I can't have the Jets do that well. I think they're gonna win between 5 and 7 games, and I think they're gonna have enough with Adam Gase. I think he's gonna be fired at the end of the year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's about the range that they should fall into because they have too much talent to be one of the worst teams in the league. But if they quit on the coaching staff, which I wouldn't blame them if they do, I could see them finishing with 5 wins. I completely forgot about George Fant until you mentioned him. So that's about what I think of him. I don't know why they paid him one of those weird 3-year, $30 million deals that we saw so many players sign last year. But it just goes to show you that they value athleticism because they spent a lot of money on him in their first 2 picks on Denzel Mims and Mekhi Becton. So clearly they're valuing athletic ability, and they'll probably bring in a new coach who also values athleticism when they have to eventually replace Adam Gase. Just one more note about the Jets, though. I'm looking at their defense, and they have some solid position groups, but one of their weakest ones is the edge rush position in the 3-4 defense that they run. Their starters are Jordan Jenkins, who is solid, but then across from him, at least listed on the depth chart that I'm checking out, is Harvey Lange, who I believe played with the Patriots for a little bit and was an inside linebacker. I am actually very happy that he's listed as a starter because I think he got into a bad car accident with them and has apparently since recovered and has made it onto the team. So props to you, Harvey, for making it back from that. But yeah, he shouldn't be a starter probably at the NFL level. He's more of a good backup at special teamer. So that's an area for the Jets to improve upon for sure.
I thought Harvey Lange was a co-host on a late night show. I never, I don't think he should be starting either. And this has been a problem for the Jets for years. I feel like I've listed edge rusher as their top need for like the past 5 or 6 years. Remember they drafted Vernon Golson? Like that was the one time they tried to address the position and it didn't work out. Just feels like they look at that pick. They're like, oh, we don't want another Vernon Golson, so they just avoid it. They definitely need to address that. That's definitely a huge need. But they also need a new head coach. So I think that's a big problem for them. All right. So we have the Dolphins left over. They went a surprising 5-11. They were getting blown out every single week to start the year. It was automatic money to fade them. And then something changed. They got better as the year progressed. I think we saw Brian Flores really emerge as a good head coach, but still they seem to be lacking in talent. So how do you think this team's going to do this year?
I think that they'll do roughly the same as what they did last year. I think they're going to be the classic case of a team that plays really hard week in and week out because, as we've seen, Brian Flores just knows how to motivate players, and it looks like he's the next rising star of a head coach. So I think that they ended up with a great hire there. And I do like the talent that the Dolphins have added this year. I think they overpaid a little for Eric Flowers, but he should be an upgrade on the offensive line. Ted Karras should be an upgrade at center. Basically, they had a ton of problems on the offensive line, and they spent 3 draft picks and signed 2 bigger free agents at the position. So I think they're going to have a lot of competition there. Should improve things for Tua. I think picking Tua was excellent for them. They were kind of tanking for him and then realized they could get him at a later pick and were able to do that. I think Tua is going to be a star if he can stay healthy. And they don't have to rush him onto the field because Ryan Fitzpatrick's a super capable backup. So I love the situation they've put Tua in, and they're not in a rush to win because Flores can afford one more subpar season, especially if the team plays well. So I think they have some good pieces in place on offense in terms of youth. I think Matt Breida and Devontae Parker are both going to have big roles this year, and it'll be interesting to see if Parker can continue to progress without Adam Gase. And really become a star receiver. And Breida being kind of the lead back there in tandem with Jordan Howard, he should have a chance to improve as well. I think on the defensive side of the ball, they're a little bit weaker. I think they have a really good cornerback group with Xavier Howard, Byron Jones, and Noah Igbinoghene, their other first round pick. But they don't have a great pass rush. They have okay linebackers. They signed Kyle Van Noy and Landon Roberts away from the Patriots, who I think will be a couple solid playmakers. But I think there's still a work in progress there. They'll need to find some better contributors in the future. But I think they made the right choice, kind of investing a lot of resources this offseason in the offense, kind of set Tua up for future success. And then they can rebuild the defense more in the upcoming offseason. So I think the Dolphins are 1 year away from being competitive, but I think they're going to fight hard. So I could see them going probably between 4 and 6 wins. I think that's kind of their range this year. They just don't have enough talent to be anything more than that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have them at 3-13 on the site, but that was like, it was tough to find them wins in the schedule. But I imagine that, some of these teams that they're going to play are going to have injuries and they're going to sneak away some wins. It kind of like they did last year. Just Brian Flores, I think, will get some wins out of them. So I think they're going to, I'd say ultimately they'll win about 5 games this year. I think the offensive line upgrades are huge, but they have no pass rush at all unless Christian Wilkins makes a big jump. He struggled as a rookie, but he has tons of potential. Like he could get better, but they have no edge rush. That's the problem that they'll have to fix. And they have a bunch of picks next year and they can do that. The linebacking core is and cornerbacks are their the best areas on the defense. Their safeties are pretty bad too. So you're going to be able to throw deep on them, I think, especially with no pass rush. Their offensive line, like I said, is going to be big for Ryan Fitzpatrick. I don't anticipate Tua Tagovailoa playing this year. Maybe like the final couple of games. His own agent, Lee Steinberg, he said that he doesn't like rookie quarterbacks playing, and he knows something about that because he has Patrick Mahomes as his top client, and Mahomes sat the entire rookie year except for the final game. So, I don't see a reason to have Tua maybe aggravate the injury. So I think that having him sit the entire year and getting ready for 2021, especially with this weird offseason, like where he doesn't get to work with anyone. I think it's best for him to sit. So you're gonna have Ryan Fitzpatrick. Like, he had some magical moments last year. I just watched the Eagles Dolphins game recently. He was just excellent in that game somehow. But he's getting pretty old. So like, maybe there will be a decline with him. So I think that, Dolphins, like you said, probably between 4 and 6 wins.
Yeah, and I think sitting Tua the whole year, if possible, makes sense, because why would you rush him into play if you're not realistically competing for any sort of playoff spot? You give him the full year to get fully healthy, something he never had a chance to do at Alabama. Even with the ankle surgeries he had, it was always like they were rushing him back to play in the LSU game, and it's understandable because they want to win at college, but it kind of was a disservice to Tua a little bit. So I think if he sits a full year, it'll be good. It'll also give the Dolphins a chance to potentially evaluate some of the other quarterbacks on their roster. If Josh Rosen can't emerge as like their starter over Fitzpatrick, they could just cut bait with him. And they also have Jake Rudock on the team, who I think is like a preseason guy who does really well in the preseason, if I remember correctly. So, we can kind of see, is he anything more than that, or can he be a backup? So I think it's kind of good for them to get a look at their other young guys and give Tua a chance to develop. So I think the Dolphins are well positioned to be competitive at some point in the future. It just won't be now.
Yeah, and Awan says in the comments he thinks Mike Gesicki is going to get better. I like Gesicki a lot this year for fantasy because he's going to play in the slot, and that's pretty big for Chan Gailey's offense. All right, let's get to the odds. The Bills are plus 138. This is on Bookmaker. The Bills are plus 138 to win the division. Dolphins are plus 1,300. Patriots now the favorites, minus 108, and the Jets are plus 930. So does anything stand out there?
I think I like the Bills just because they're second to the Patriots, and it's understandable why. I mean, the Patriots have Bill Belichick, and the addition of Cam Newton really changes the game there. But I still think that the Bills, like you mentioned, have that advantage over the Patriots in terms of their secondary and receiving core. So I think the Bills could emerge and really should emerge as the winners in this division. And betting on Cam Newton to stay healthy is not something that I would do, even though I'm hoping that he will, because I don't like the division race that much better. So I might put a little bit on the Bills there. It's not like a great value or anything, but I think given that I think them and the Patriots have about the same chance of winning the division, at least in my mind. So I'm willing to put down a little bit on the Bills at that number.
Yeah, it seems like good value. The Bills are favored before the Cam Newton trade. And I could obviously see the Patriots winning the division, but I think at plus 138, I like the Bills a little bit. If the numbers were inverted, if the Bills were minus 108 and the Patriots were plus 138, I probably like the Patriots at plus 138. So I like the Bills like you do at the number. So let's get to the NFC East. So many people think that this is a 2-horse race. I don't agree with that, but let's begin with the Cowboys and Eagles. Out of those two teams, which do you think is better and why?
So this is a tough pick because you can either pick the one team that is elite on one side of the ball, but not so much on the other, or you pick the better balanced team that has injury issues. I'm going to go with the better balanced team. I'm going to go with the Eagles in this case. The Eagles made the playoffs last year despite like 90% of their team being injured is what it felt like. So I think they should have a chance to compete for that once again. I like Carson Wentz. I think he's a great quarterback. They've added more receivers to their roster. They spent a first-round pick on Jalen Reagor, which was a little bit of a surprising pick, but he has speed and potential. And if he can, if Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey can get and stay healthy, having Reagor on the field with those two could really make a dynamic offense when paired with Zach Ertz. So I like that unit. They have a little bit of a concern on the offensive line with Brandon Brooks getting injured, but they have a decent backup in Matt Pryor. It's just more about, can they sustain another injury? That's a big question without Jason Peters on the team. Defensively, I think they're very much improved. They added Javon Hargrave to the defensive line. They traded for Darius Slay and signed Nickel Roby-Coleman at the cornerback position. Corner was one of their biggest weaknesses last year. So getting Slay to be a true number one guy there is huge because Ronald Darby could not hold up because of all the injuries that he had. And, he was on the field probably a little bit earlier than he should have been. But I like him a lot to bounce back Darius Slay and replace Darby there. So I think their secondary is improved. Their defense has an excellent pass rush and they're deep up front. So I think they should be in the mix if they can avoid injuries and if Carson Wentz can stay healthy. I could see them winning 10 or 11 games. But they also have, like, if Wentz gets hurt or if they have too many problems on the offensive line, I could see them going like 7-9 because there are some weak spots in the middle of that defense. And if Slay were to get banged up, their cornerback group would be very thin all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I agree. Like a couple of weeks ago, I would completely agree with what you said. If the Eagles could stay healthy, they could go 10-6, 11-5, win the division. The problem is they already have a major injury. Brandon Brooks went down for the year. He tore his Achilles. Brandon Brooks is one of the top guards in the NFL, and it's so telling that Carson Wentz in his career, he's never won a single game in which Brooks has played fewer than 50% of his snaps. Never happened. And I think that's absolutely insane. It just shows how good Brandon Brooks is. You couple that with Jason Peters leaving, I think that spells kind of like a big issue on the offensive line. Now, maybe Andre Dillard can really develop in the second year. He had a rough go of it in his rookie campaign, but I think that with his athleticism, he can make a big jump. But if Dillard continues to struggle and then they have issues in the interior of their offensive line, if one more lineman goes down like this, it's a disaster. So I think the Eagles could have a lot of trouble offensively if that happens. Also, you can't really count on these receivers staying healthy. Alshon Jeffrey always injured. Deshaun Jackson's always injured. And you're going to have Jalen Reagor at that point. If both guys go down, he's going to be the number one receiver with no experience. It's just a big issue. Defensively, I love the Darius Slay acquisition as well. I mean, there's a big upgrade at corner. The problem is they have other issues elsewhere. They lost Malcolm Jenkins, such a big player in their secondary. He's able to play everywhere, like safety. He played in the nickel. Not having him around just loses so much versatility and just playmaking ability at safety. I think they have one of the worst linebacking cores in the NFL. They lost Nigel Bradham. They lost a couple other guys, and they really don't have much there. And I was kind of surprised that they didn't really upgrade that area. But I love their defensive line, though. So, like, they have some strong areas. Like Carson Wentz, I love him. If the receivers stay healthy, they're great. If Andre Dillard improves and no one else in the line gets hurt, they have a good line and great number one cornerback and great defensive line. So they have a lot of potential. They can go 10-6, 11-5. But given the injury history of a lot of their guys, I mean, this could get very ugly. I could see maybe 6-10, 7-9.
Yeah, I think that's probably about their floor. I think they have a wide range of outcomes. And you mentioned the linebacker core. I don't understand why Nigel Bradham is unsigned right now. He's probably asking for more money than teams are willing to give him. But the Eagles should really call him up and try to bring him back because you're right. Their linebacker core is insanely weak. I mean, we're talking about Nathan Gary, TJ Edwards, and Duke Riley being the three starters and maybe third-round pick Davion Taylor, who was a massive, massive reach. Playing a role there. I just don't see that happening. So they got to do something to strengthen the middle of their defense. I think bringing back Bradham would make a ton of sense, but obviously there's a reason they're not doing it. So maybe they have more faith in some of these guys, or maybe they just simply can't afford it.
Maybe TJ's bringing up Jalen Hurts could start for the Eagles. Maybe linebacker, considering how bad their linebacker core is. Maybe they should use their second round pick on a linebacker. I think that would have been better. Let's go to the Cowboys then. So do you like? I mean, you said you like the Eagles more than the Cowboys, and I think I agree. But what's your outlook on Dallas?
So obviously, if you look at Dallas, their offense looks really great on paper. I mean, they drafted CeeDee Lamb, so they have like one of the better three-man receiving cores in the league, maybe if not the best possibly, between Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb. Michael Gallup also doesn't get enough attention for just how good he is because he's a number 2 receiver, but he had over 1,000 receiving yards last year. I didn't even know that until I looked at his numbers like 2 weeks ago. So I'm on board. The Michael Gallup is better than people think train. Their offensive line is still very good. They lost Travis Frederick to retirement, which is going to be a loss, but they have a couple potential replacements in Joe Looney, who's kind of a solid interior lineman backup, and Tyler Biadasz, who they drafted in the 4th round this year. So I think one of those guys will emerge as a potential replacement. I don't love Dak Prescott, but when he's surrounded by talent, I think he's going to be fine. So he's definitely surrounded by talent this year. And even if he were to go down or struggle, they have Andy Dalton, who's probably one of the 2 or 3 best backups in the league. So I think they're well positioned to compete on offense. Defensively, it's a different story. They lost Byron Jones, which is absolutely massive for the team because he could play anywhere in the secondary. And now they don't have him to start outside. They don't have him to help at safety if you had to do that. And they drafted Trayvon Diggs to potentially replace him, and I like Diggs, but I don't know if he's ready to be a number one cornerback, and they don't have anyone else really who can step up into that role. Things are a little better in the linebacking core. They still have Leighton Vander Esch, Jalen Smith, Sean Lee, who are a solid trio. And they have DeMarcus Lawrence up front, but aside from them, I don't think they have a ton of talent in the front seven. So I think they're going to struggle overall to generate pass rush and contain passing offenses. They might be better against the run because they're linebackers, but I think ultimately the Cowboys are going to be a team that wins with offense. They're going to have to score a lot, and they're going to give up a lot of passing yards and points and touchdowns. So unless they can fix that defense or sign someone like Jadeveon Clowney, who reportedly may want to play for the Cowboys, I don't know. I don't know just how good their team's going to be overall.
Yeah, it feels like every game of theirs is going to be 41-34. The problem is that their defense is so bad, it's going to be 41 to the other team, like very often. You mentioned the cornerbacks just awful unless Trayvon Diggs just comes out of nowhere as a second-round pick. And there's a reason why he slipped to the second round. I like the move, but it might take him a while to get going. Their safeties aren't very good. Clinton Dix was signed there, but he's just like above average. Otherwise, they're not very good in the secondary. Their pass rush, like you said, it's like DeMarcus Lawrence, and then that's it. They don't have Robert Quinn anymore. He signed with the Bears. Their interior of their line is good with McCoy and Poe and stopping the run, but they can't get to the quarterback anymore at this point in their careers. So their defense looks very weak. Offensively, they have so many stars. And Steve Smith on the NFL Network, we mentioned him earlier in the podcast. Right after the draft, he said that this year's Cowboys team is going to be like the 90s Cowboys team with Aikman, Emmett, and Michael Irvin. And I don't understand where he got that from. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott is amazing. But Amari Cooper has faded down the stretch every year. He's been basically in the league. CeeDee Lamb, I love CeeDee Lamb, and we have a question here if he can be Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think that's definitely possible, especially if Amari Cooper wilts down the stretch again. So I think that gives him some insurance. The problem is like Dak Prescott is just okay. Like he's like I would even say a subpar quarterback. Like he does well if everything is great around him, but all it takes is one injury. And Travis Frederick's already gone. So I think that maybe counts as one. All it takes is one more injury on top of Frederick being gone to really capsize the offense. And we've seen Dallas really struggle when they've been down two linemen. Let's just say Tyron Smith, who's had back issues over the past couple of years. If he misses a few games, Dallas is not going to score many points. We saw them lose to the Jets when they were missing Tyron Smith. So I think that's going to be a problem for them. And I just think that with how bad their defense is, they're going to have to be completely healthy offensively for the entire year, which could happen. But I wouldn't bet on it. So I think Dallas is probably going to finish 8-8 or 9-7.
Yeah, I think that's about right for them. I think they're kind of a high floor team, but I question how high their ceiling could truly be. And obviously high floor is like if they don't get injured. If they suffer injuries, they could have a much lower floor. But I think they're right around that, like eight wins is probably their floor, but I see 10 wins as their ceiling. So we'll see what ends up happening with them.
Yeah. Real quick, Kenny says the Patriots missed out on trading for the true GOAT, Nick Foles. Cam Newton's a decent backup option, definitely an upgrade over the stiff they had last year. We'll see. I love the Buccaneers this year. I think there's a good chance to win the Super Bowl with that stiff, apparently. All right. So the consensus, like I said, 2-horse race in the NFC East. However, my team that I believe will win the divisions, the New York Giants. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on them.
Yeah, I'm buying into the Giants too. I mean, if you look at them on offense, they're very strong overall. I mean, I talk about the Cowboys 3-man receiving group, but how about this one? Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard, and Darius Slayton, who really emerged last year as a quality playmaker as a rookie. I think he's poised for a breakout. Their offensive line is pretty strong, and they bolstered it further by adding Andrew Thomas to the mix. They have Evan Engram at tight end and Caden Smith, who they claimed off waivers last year and turned into a quality playmaker as well. Really, all this boils down to is, can Daniel Jones progress? And I think the answer is yes. We saw flashes as a rookie. He was really solid. He reminds me a lot of Carson Wentz. A lot of people bemoaned the Daniel Jones pick, but he was a pretty pro-ready prospect. The only issue he had was with turnovers that stemmed from holding the ball a little bit too long and, fumbling the ball and strip sacks. I think that was him trying to make too much out of certain scenarios. I think he's well positioned to, in the future, release the ball quicker, get the ball out to his pass catching weapons, get the ball to Saquon Barkley out of the backfield too. Dion Lewis was signed, so he has a ton of weapons around him. If the new coaching staff can get him to kind of speed up his internal clock, I think he could have a fantastic season. And I know both you and I have long shot bets on him to win MVP, I believe at 100-1 odds, both of us. So I mean, it's not unheard of for a second-year quarterback to make a massive leap. And when it's one who is as pro-ready as Daniel Jones was coming in, I think he has a good chance to improve overall and really lead this Giants offense. Now, their defense is a little bit more suspect. They don't have a lot of pass rushing talent, but they did make some upgrades to the secondary. They signed James Bradbury, who I think is a huge upgrade, gives them a true number one corner, something that they lacked last year. They're going to need some other players to step up, or they might need to sign Jadeveon Clowney if they can, either pay him enough or convince him that they can be a winning team. I could see him being a big addition there. But they also signed Blake Martinez, and that's going to be huge for their linebacker core because their linebackers have been terrible for years. Even when they won the Super Bowl against the Patriots back in 2012, I feel like there were some holes at linebacker. I think Chase Blackburn was there. So Giants are going to have some of their young talent step up on defense, but I think they're good enough against the run. It's just all about finding a way to succeed against the pass. We'll see if they can do that. They may need another cornerback or another good pass rusher to do that, but I think they have the pieces in place to surprise.
Yeah, everyone in the comment sections freaking out about their defense. I think it's going to be a lot better this year. You mentioned James Bradbury being the number one corner. Like, that's a huge upgrade over what they had. Like, Janoris Jenkins struggled last year. It didn't seem like he was trying. And they've had Eli Apple in the past, and he wasn't very good. But James Bradbury's a legit number one corner. So that's a big upgrade. They also drafted Xavier McKinney in the second round. I love McKinney. I thought he should have been taken in the first round. He only fell because all the safeties fell, really. But yeah, he's going to be another big upgrade at safety that they lost with Landon Collins. So automatically in the secondary, they're a lot better. You mentioned Blake Martinez. He's the best linebacker they've had in a long time. So that's going to help a lot. And people forget they added Leonard Williams during the second half of the year last year. Leonard Williams is a big upgrade for the run defense. The run defense was excellent last year down the stretch. The problem was that they couldn't stop the pass at all because their secondary was so bad. Now with Bradbury and McKinney and also Martinez in the linebacking core, they're going to be better against the pass. As you said, the edge rush is kind of suspect right now. They did add Kyler Fackrell, and I think that, it's not like a great player or anything, but I think he could be a solid role player for them. They still need a number one edge rusher, but he can be like a number 2 or number 3 edge rusher for them. So I think overall their defense will be a lot better. It won't be great or anything, but it would be better. I think it'll be in like the middle of the pack at least. And I think that's all it will take for their offense. Remember last year, Saquon Barkley got hurt in week 3 against the Buccaneers. And at the time, people thought he was going to be out for 8 weeks. That's what the medical report said. He came back like 3 weeks later, but he wasn't quite himself. And people kind of forget, I think, that 8 weeks after that, he was himself. And he closed the end of the season on like a tear. And it was the 8-week timetable, like all along. And that's all it took. So I think with Barkley being 100% for the entire year, that's going to be huge for them. And he's going to have a better offensive line from him. Andrew Thomas was a big addition in the draft. Will really strengthen the blocking, and that'll help Daniel Jones. As you said, his main weakness last year was protecting the football. And that's something you can work on. And he's really showed some great flashes at times. So I think Daniel Jones is going to make a big leap in a second year. And speaking of second year quarterbacks, like how many times are going to see it? Like Carson Wentz in his second year, the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Jared Goff in his second year, the Rams went from 4-12 to winning the division. Lamar Jackson in his second year, they had the best record in the NFL. Russell Wilson in his second year, they won the Super Bowl. I can go on and on. Mr. Trubisky in his second year, even though he wasn't that good, the Bears went to the playoffs and almost won the playoff game. I can list so many examples of this. And teams have such a big advantage with quarterbacks making little money now in the CBA that I think the Giants were able to sign some of these guys that we mentioned earlier So I think the sky's the limit for them. I think there's a legitimate chance they even win the Super Bowl this year. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Now, granted, I think the Chiefs and the Buccaneers and the Saints are better than them right now for sure. But all it takes is a couple lucky wins in the playoffs, and I think the Giants will get to the playoffs. If they can get some luck in the playoffs, I think they can get there and win the Super Bowl.
And if there's one team in NFL history that knows about lucking into wins in the playoffs, it's the New York Giants, because during my life, they have ruined it twice in the playoffs for the Patriots. In years that the Patriots really should have won. And, it's part luck. It's a lot skill too. I'll admit to that. I think the Giants are a big time sleeper team. No one's really talking about them. And I think you and I agree that this division isn't exactly strong. Each team has some massive holes. I do think the Giants probably have to add a player on defense to get some wins in the playoffs. I don't know if they'll be able to do that. One thing to note for them, though, currently their depth chart does not have Marcus Golden on it, who I believe had double-digit sacks last year and is kind of an underrated pass rusher as a rush linebacker in a 3-4 defense. But at this point in time, I believe he will soon re-sign because they put some weird tag on him that hadn't been used since the Patriots used it on LeGarrette Blount. That's basically like any team that tries to sign this player has to, this factors into the comp pick formula. So I think Golden will be back, so that'll be a boost for them. One thing that won't be a boost for them is I'm looking over their coaching staff. Jason Garrett's the offensive coordinator, which could be fine, but he's there. Also, Freddie Kitchens is there. So hopefully Joe Judge won't be taking any head coaching advice from those two, and we'll just more be about, all right, you guys can run the offense and stuff, but listen to quarterback coach Jerry Shaplinski a little bit more in terms of how to do that, because we don't want the bad coaching practices rubbing off on Joe Judge there.
No, definitely not. But those guys have been good offensive coordinators in the past, or so maybe there's some potential there. I know you like Joe Judge, and I like that move as well. So I think that does bode well for them. They're 150-1 to win the Super Bowl on bookmaker.com. That's crazy. I think that's insane. I already bet them at 145-1. I think 150-1 is pretty close. But I'm still tempted to put a little bit more on it. Like I said, I like gun to my head, bet $1, as Kenny would say. I don't think the Giants will win the Super Bowl, but 150-1 is just insane value. This team is very good. I think they're going to be in the playoffs, and you can hedge once they get there at that number. All right, so we have the Redskins remaining, and you cover them. Go ahead. What do you think about this year?
Yeah, I think the Redskins are kind of in a similar boat to the Dolphins. I think that they're building in the right direction. I love Ron Rivera's fit here. He's kind of the exact coach that they needed. They needed someone to instill a culture, kind of fix the program there, because it's been for the last couple decades under Dan Snyder, it's been like one massive roller coaster ride. Rivera is kind of a stabilizing force, and I like what they've done this offseason. They've added a lot of competition to the roster. No real big name free agents, but a lot of smaller deals for guys like Logan Thomas, Kendall Fuller, Sean Davis, guys who can compete for roster spots and really just, take a chance on some guys. And if they pan out, they can re-sign them. If not, mostly short-term money. So they're not risking a whole lot. But if you look at this team, there is one massive strength. Their defensive line is probably one of the best in the league. It's right up there with the 49ers. Not a lot of people realize just how good the Redskins D-line is. They have 5 former first-round picks on there. Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, and Montez Sweat have been picked 4 consecutive years, and they're the long-term starters there. They also have Ryan Kerrigan, who's still a factor. He had his worst season last year and still put up 6 sacks, I think. And then they have Matt Ioannidis, Tim Settle, and Ryan Anderson, all really good backups, all who could fit in on this defense. So that group is elite and should generate a ton of pressure. The problem is the rest of the team has a lot of holes in it. If you look at their offense, they have basically Terry McLaurin, and that's about it. That's all that they have that's proven. Steven Sims showed well in the slot last year. They have some young talent at running back and receiver, but nothing really proven. Darius Geis could be a really good running back, but he hasn't been healthy for 2 years, basically. He played a few games last year, but he hasn't stayed healthy. And really how this team performs overall is going to come down to what Dwayne Haskins can show in his second year. Haskins has enormous arm talent, and he could easily pan out and make a big leap this second year, and I think he will. He just wasn't ready to start last year after being a one-year starter in college. So I think he should be better, but it's a question of how much better, and how much better can he be with weaknesses around him. They don't have a tight end. They don't have a very good receiving core. They're probably only a couple notches above the Patriots at most. And their offensive line has big questions on the left side. If Sadiq Charles, who they drafted in the 4th round, doesn't pan out at left tackle, we're talking about Cornelius Lucas getting the snaps there, which Lucas was good for the Bears last year, but he's really just a big swing tackle guy. And their back seven, we talk about the Giants and Cowboys having weak defenses. If you took away the Redskins defensive line, things would not look very good, because they have minimal talent at cornerback outside of Kendall Fuller, who's a good slot man. They have just no proven talent there. Ronald Darby's on a 1-year deal. So maybe he'll pan out, but he's been toast and he's been hurt for the last couple of years. Landon Collins is back there, but he can't do it all by himself. And then the linebacker core is just a bunch of guys that you've probably heard of, but no one that has like a real role right now, other than Thomas Davis, who's 37 or 38 at this point. He's there to be a veteran stabilizing presence. So long story short, the Redskins, they have some talent. They have a lot of youth, and they're building in the right direction, but things are not going to come together this year. They would need too much improvement from Dwayne Haskins, and they'd need too many holes to be filled internally for them to be very competitive. I see this as probably, like the Dolphins, a 4 to 6 win team. But if they get to 6 wins, that's a good season for them. That means that they're building in the right direction and playing hard under Rivera, something that never happened under Jay Gruden.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I love their defensive line. I think they have potential in their secondary with Landon Collins, and if Ronald Darby could stay healthy, like a big if. But we've seen him play very well when he's been healthy earlier in his career. And then they got back Kendall Fuller. There are some pieces for their secondary to be good. I think Thomas Davis being on the field, he's obviously not what he used to be, but at least he's a veteran presence, and that's something they didn't have at linebacker last year, really. So I think that's a big deal. Dwayne Haskins improved in every start he made last year. I think people remember the first start he made. Well, it wasn't a start. He came in for an injured Case Keenum against the Giants, and he was just awful. But I think people forget that the Redskins were down 3 starting offensive linemen in that game. So it wasn't a really fair measuring stick, and Haskins had his struggles against the Vikings in the second half when Keenum got hurt again. But he got better every week late in the year, and I think that could carry over into this season. McLaurin is going to be better now that he has experience. I like Steve Sims. I think he has upside. We'll see if Darius Geis can stay healthy for once. Like that could happen. But the offensive line is the big issue. We'll see what happens with them. You talked about Sadiq Charles, their 4th round rookie left tackle. That's a big problem. Unless he can be great right away, which I kind of doubt. The left guard is also an issue, I think. And then you look at the right side, you have Brandon Sheriff, who just struggles to stay healthy. Morgan Moses struggles to stay healthy. So things could really fall apart for them. If both Moses and Sheriff go down, they won't be able to block anyone, and they won't be able to win any games. Conversely, if they stay healthy and like Charles is just below average, I think this team could win 5-6 games or so. So I think they're definitely going to be better than they were last year. But they're not ready yet. Like you said, I think they're at least a year away from being competitive.
Yeah, and to your point on Morgan Moses, he's constantly been nicked up over the course of the past few years. He never misses a start, though, so credit to him. But he's committed in the last 2 seasons 30 penalties. So like most teams, if that happened, they'd be like, all right, this guy's out on the street. But the Redskins had so many holes that they kind of needed to just say, like, all right, Morgan Moses has one more year before we can cut him with less than $2 million in dead cap. So we'll give him one more chance to prove himself. And who knows, maybe if he's healthy, it'll work out better. But I have a lot of doubts about the offensive line, pretty much outside of Chase Roulier, who was pretty underrated in my opinion. Everyone always yells at me and tells me he's terrible when I say that. But, that's just how people get about the center position. We have Juan is mentioning Antonio Gibson. He wants to see how they use Antonio Gibson. I'm also excited to see what they do with him because he was a 1-year wonder at Memphis, but he was super explosive. I think that if he can find a role as kind of the Christian McCaffrey type back in this Scott Turner offense, that would be certainly exciting. I'm not saying he's as good as McCaffrey, but he can catch a lot of passes, and he's a guy I'm all over in fantasy as like a last round sleeper in PPR. Like if your commissioner lets you not draft a kicker, draft Antonio Gibson instead of a kicker. Of course, I don't let people not draft kickers, so you can target him in the 14th round too. So we'll see how he pans out. But I'm interested to see Gibson. I think he's going to be one of the more exciting prospects to keep an eye on for them.
Yeah, he'll take the Chris Thompson role, I assume, and there is upside there. We'll see. Maybe Antonio Gandy Golden becomes a good secondary receiver. So definitely a lot of upside with the Redskins, and I could see why some people would like them as sleepers. I just don't trust their offensive line. You mentioned Morgan Moses. Yeah, like he's always there. It just seems like they just copy paste Morgan Moses questionable on the injury report every week. Hopefully he can stay healthy for a change. That'd be nice to see. All right, let's get to the odds on Bookmaker. The Cowboys are the favorites on Bookmaker, minus 126. The Giants plus 1,800, which I already bet. Spoiler alert. The Eagles are plus 121, and the Redskins are plus 2,600. So thoughts on those?
I mean, Giants plus 1,800 is like unfathomable to me. Like, again, I get it. They may not pan out and they have some weaknesses on defense, but for them to be that far removed from the top two teams in this division seems completely asinine to me. I just think they have as good a chance at winning the division as those other two teams. I think they have a higher ceiling, maybe a lower floor than the Cowboys, but I'll bet on the high ceiling 10 times out of 10, especially at that price. So I'm all over that. I'm not looking to touch the Cowboys or the Eagles because this division it feels like something has to change in the NFL every year. And it feels like this division's like a pretty good bet for something to change, where it's been like Eagles, Cowboys for the last few years, kind of competing right up to the end, but never really getting further than 10 wins. So I'll take my chances on the Giants. I'm definitely going to bet that as soon as we're done with this podcast.
It's an amazing number. Like I said, I bet it already at plus 1,800. I that is the best number for the divisions we talked about so far. They're like easily, and they're my top team in this division, and they're 18-1 odds, which is just amazing. I will say though that as we get closer to the season, if in like whatever training camp we have, if there are reports that Sadiq Charles is looking great and Dwayne Haskins is looking great, and Ronald Darby's healthy, like plus 2,600. It's not crazy. I don't like the Cowboys and the Eagles. So someone's going to have to win this division. And if the Redskins are a lot better than people think they are, I think 26-1 is a good number. I wouldn't bet it now, but if we got a lot of positive news on them, I think I would consider it.
Yeah. I could definitely, like, at that number, sure, why not take a risk if things seem to be breaking good? Again, there are just so many holes that have to be filled, so I'm still skeptical of it, but who knows? Maybe if the Redskins start doing well and, Ron Rivera realizes, hey, we need a tight end, or hey, we are a receiver away from really potentially making noise here, then maybe they can go out and get someone like, the guys we talked about earlier, like a Marvin Jones type or a Dante Pettis, or, tight end position. Seattle has like 17 of them. So let's go get Jacob Hollister. He's probably better than Logan Thomas. Just add some depth and weapons on offense, and maybe they might have a chance. So I don't hate it. I think the big thing is we'll monitor how Dwayne Haskins is doing this offseason. I think he's probably one of my top 5 players just league wide to watch in training camp, because if he really makes strides, I think that he improves the Redskins by a couple wins. Whereas if he really doesn't make strides, the Redskins could have another top 3 pick. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But definitely a team to watch, a team that has more potential than I think some people realize.
Yeah, that's true. So like keeping an eye on the news is very important for this. You can get a great number if things change. Like let's just say like a player goes down on one of these teams that's not like a quarterback. Obviously, if Carson Wentz or Dak Prescott goes down, these odds will change dramatically. But let's just say Tyron Smith goes down with an injury, or Lane Johnson on the Eagles. Suddenly, Giants at plus 1,800 will look a lot better than it already does. So maybe you'd want to put even more money on that. So just keep an eye on these numbers and just follow the news. We'll have updates on this at walterfootball.com. So yeah, I guess that's it for our season preview. Maybe next week we'll talk about how these teams will do in the playoffs and talk about our Super Bowl predictions. So, yeah. So, do you have anything else or anything to plug?
I got nothing else except hoping that next week my prediction will be better than the Falcons Steelers Super Bowl I picked, and hopefully it'll be closer to the year I picked Eagles over Patriots in June, which I think you also did. So props to us for that year of picking. But yeah, so you can follow me at Jacob Camenker on Twitter. I've got a bunch of stuff coming out at Rigo's Rag, the Redskins site I work for. I have a ton of tweet thoughts on Cam Newton as well over there, and some a statistical breakdown of him and Brady in the last 16 games. So feel free to check that out. Sorry, I'm not a graphics whiz. It's just kind of a souped up Excel table. And it took me far too long to make that, but please enjoy. Also, happy 30th anniversary to my parents. That is today. So hope you guys, when you listen to this, hope you guys had a good anniversary, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, happy anniversary to the Camenkers. That's awesome. It's a great milestone. That's awesome. Yeah, and happy 4th to everyone else. Have a great weekend. It should be a fun time. But yeah, you can go to walterfootball.com for all updates. Our season previews are coming to an end. We still have the NFC East to do and the Super Bowl predictions. And then we're going to cover the fantasy football a lot. I'm going to have quarterback power rankings as well, which I worked on. And I kind of have to change because of the Cam Newton signing. So I have to do that. Otherwise, please hit subscribe on YouTube. And just send this link out to anyone who might like football. I will talk to you next week.
All right. Sounds good. Talk to you then.